Okay, so how in the world does a small island nation with just about 11 million people manage to leave a permanent mark on an entire continent, and in doing so, how did they literally change the course of history for millions? Well, today we're going to unpack that exact story.
This quote right here from Fidel Castro himself, it really gets to the heart of this unique relationship. You see, this wasn't about charity, and it wasn't about geopolitical games. For him, it was this deeply personal bond, this feeling of a shared destiny. So how did that feeling, that bond, translate into one of the most significant interventions in modern African history? How did it end up challenging the entire global order? All right, let's get into it. To really get a handle on Cuba's role in Africa, we've got to start with the core belief that drove its revolution way beyond its own shores. It's this idea called revolutionary internationalism.
For Castro, this was so much more than just a political slogan. It was a fundamental duty. He truly believed that the fight for justice in Havana was inseparable from the one in Luanda or Johannesburg. It was for him a moral imperative. And boy, was this powerful ideology put to the test. The year was 1975. A brand new, independent African nation, literally on the day of its birth, finds itself facing an invasion and sends out this desperate call for help.
The timing here is just absolutely critical. Angola was just moments away from celebrating its hard-won independence when forces, backed by apartheid South Africa, invaded. The main liberation movement, the MPLA, reached out to Cuba, and the response? Well, it was immediate and incredibly decisive. And get this. The name of the mission, Operation Carlota, was so significant. It wasn't some random code name. It was chosen specifically to connect Cuba's own history of fighting slavery with Africa's struggle for liberation. A really powerful symbol.
The commitment was just massive. By the end of 1975, only a few weeks after the operation even started, 10,000 Cuban volunteer troops had already joined the battle to defend Angola's sovereignty.
And believe it or not, that was just the beginning. Over the next 13 years, the total number of Cubans who would take part in Operation Carlota reached this staggering figure, 300,000. Just try to wrap your head around that. A small island nation sent a whole army across an ocean to fight for another country's freedom.
But here's the thing. This massive intervention didn't just save Angola. No, it created a seismic shift across the entire region, and it ultimately helped bring down one of the most brutal regimes of the 20th century.
The critical moment all came down to the Battle of Cuanavale. Now, we're not talking about some small skirmish here. This was the largest battle on African soil since World War II, and it was here that the supposedly invincible apartheid army was handed a humiliating defeat. And who better to sum up the impact than Nelson Mandela himself? He called this victory the turning point, the very moment that signaled the beginning of the end for apartheid. I mean, the entire political map of Southern Africa was completely redrawn. Before this battle, the apartheid military seemed unbeatable. After, that myth was shattered. Namibia finally gained its independence, and the apartheid regime itself was so weakened that it sped up its own downfall.
But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. Cuba's commitment to Africa didn't end on the battlefield. In fact, what came after the war was maybe an even more profound act of solidarity. First, we have to talk about the human cost. Over 2,000 Cubans sacrificed their lives during that 13-year war. They fought and they died for a cause on a continent thousands of miles from their homes. And then came a new kind of army. In the decades that followed, thousands upon thousands of Cuban doctors, teachers, and engineers served in Africa, continuing that powerful legacy of internationalism.
Yeah, Cuba built a completely different kind of army, an army of white coats. They offered thousands of scholarships, and today, doctors who are trained in Cuba are leading medical advancements all across Africa, and they often provide services from basic checkups all the way to heart transplants completely free of charge.
And you can really feel the impact on a human level when you hear stories like this one. This is a direct quote from a leading Ghanaian neurosurgeon who got his entire education from med school to his neurosurgery specialization in Cuba. It is a legacy of healing that is still saving lives today.
So why does any of this matter today? Well, this history of military and medical solidarity is so much more than just a fascinating relic of the Cold War. It actually provides a powerful and enduring model for how the world could and maybe should work.
What this history really represents, what it boils down to, is a foundational example of what we call South-South cooperation. It proved that nations in the global South could band together, support each other, and forge their own destinies, creating a powerful alternative to the established global power structures.
Ultimately, the story of Cuba and Africa leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the most powerful force for change isn't wealth or military might. Maybe it's the simple, revolutionary conviction that our struggles are, and always have been, bound together.